Good morning. We're excited to be here. We want to first hear some introductions from our panelists. So first we have LaTisha Harris.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I am LaTisha Harris. I am an activist and a community organizer with Mothers Outfront. I'm currently working in California. I also serve on the City of Fresno District 3 Parks Committee, as well as the NAACP Environmental Justice and Sustainability Chair. I've been working to bring justice to frontline communities for the last 6 years, and I use she, her pronouns.
And
Great.
hi,
We're happy to have you. And we're also joined by Franta.
Hi, yeah, my name is Ben Franta. That's okay. I'm a lawyer. I'm a PhD student in history at Stanford University, and I study the history of climate science and fossil fuel companies, and I help advise climate lawsuit efforts in the US and internationally.
Great. And my name is Kat Lockwood. I use she and her pronouns. I am the Associate Organizing Director for NARAL Pro-Choice America and previously worked with CalPERC students when we won the American Climate Leadership Award. So we are here to talk about what inspired us to become climate superheroes, what impacts we've been able to make on this issue, and then also how other people can take the next step on their own journey to standing up for the climate. So I would love to hear from the other folks on our panel. Maybe we'll start with you, Ben. What got you involved in climate advocacy?
Yeah, it's actually kind of funny. I got involved with climate on accident. I grew up in a small town in Iowa, and it was a fairly conservative environment. And I had never even heard of climate change or really done anything with it until I went to graduate school. So I was already in my mid-20s by the time, I even knew that the issue was important. I learned about it. And to be honest with you, initially I was skeptical because I hadn't learned about it before. And that actually piqued my interest in doing research in it. And the more, I learned about it, the more concerned I became about the problem. And then, shifted my efforts towards that. First working in renewable energy technology because my background was in the sciences, and then now moving towards history and law because I think that these climate litigation efforts are very important. So I guess it just sort of goes to show that sometimes things in life happen on unexpected ways. But, it's been, something that I've been just passionate about working on for the last, decade or so. So, thanks that's my kind of random story, but thank you for having me.
And how about you, LaTisha? How did you first get involved?
I have a very similar story to Ben. It was by accident. It wasn't intentional at all. I actually live in the same neighborhood that I grew up in. My parents bought a home, and I lived in this neighborhood since I was born. And so a lot of the things that I saw in the neighborhood, I thought was normal. I thought was okay. Seeing the factories, the freeways, asthma that runs in our family, I thought it was normal. It was something that was just genetic. And then I was working for a small nonprofit who was awarded a project. We had a study that came in and identified the zip code that I live in and one other zip code in our city, which is just a few miles on the other side. It identified our zip code with the highest poverty rates, the highest pollution rates, and the highest asthma rates in the nation. And that's when my eyes were open that this isn't normal and that this is not okay. And so I begin to literally feel like my neighborhood is literally killing not only me, but my children, because I have two sons that both suffer with asthma as well. And so it was through that program that we begin to make change little bit by bit within our community, which is now a pilot program throughout the state and the nation to help fight climate or to fight climate change throughout the nation.
That's amazing. I'd love to hear more about your work and your organization. Will you tell us more about it and what impact you've been able to make, how the project has evolved?
Absolutely. So Mothers Outfront is a national organization mobilizing for a livable climate. We're unified by the drive to protect our children. So it doesn't mean it's just mothers that are fighting, but anyone that wants to fight for our children. So oftentimes you'll hear us say mothers and others. But on a national level, we've been able to do things like fight pipelines. We've been able to stop new fracking in California. Anything to do with the climate change crisis, we have been able to do on a national front. Each one of us, or throughout the state, we have various teams, and we work on specific projects. So here in Fresno, we have worked on building new green space. We've worked on reducing EV emissions, we've worked on reducing emissions by way of electric vehicles and charging stations and doing outreach and education within those disadvantaged communities. We've also worked on helping to do neighborhood cleanups, not just the bigger things, but also focusing on the smaller things that our neighbors and our family and our children can get involved in.
That's great to hear about. I thought I could share a little bit more about my project and how I got involved as well. I actually got started doing youth activism back when I was a freshman in college. And then I, post-grad, decided to become a community organizer working with youth climate activists. And that's what I did for the next 10 years. Like Ada was saying in the last presentation, it really is young people who are going to inherit this planet that we leave for them. So I've been really motivated to work to empower young people, give them the organizing tools to make a difference on this issue that affects them. So for my organization, I, in 2017, was working with the student PIRGs and CalPIRG students when we launched a campaign to get 50 college campuses across the entire country to switch to 100% renewable energy to fight climate change. So a lofty goal. But we started out in California, where I live. We were working on 8 different University of California campuses. And our California chapter, CalPIRG students, ended up running and winning a campaign for a UC-wide commitment on 100% renewable electricity. So that university system has 238,000 students across 10 different campuses. So their plan to run completely on electricity from renewable energy by 2025 was the farthest reaching campus commitment in the entire country. And our strategy to win really did depend on building the widespread support for climate solutions that we know is out there. We know that students, professors, administrators in our campus community are with us and agree that we urgently need to fight climate change. We just needed to organize all of those people together and demonstrate that support. So we educated 30,000 students through class presentations. We signed on 20,000 students to a petition. We got all 10 of the university's student governments to sign and call for a commitment. We signed on 100 faculty in support and brought 200 students together for a clean energy lobby day. But all of that really did start out with small groups of students that realized that they needed to reach out to their friends, to their classmates, ask their professor to get involved in the campaign. And we really built it up from something small to something quite large. And it took a couple of years, but we were able to help students get their university to make the kind of commitment to fighting climate change that we really need. And it's the kind of commitment that can be replicated in so many other institutions. People can get their companies, their schools, their city governments to make similar commitments. And that's really what we need across the entire country. So that's sharing a little bit more about me. But Ben, we haven't heard from you yet. Will you tell us about your project?
Absolutely. And I just want to, mention I had a very similar experience as you. Years ago, I became involved with the fossil fuel divestment movement. That was my first time doing activism. And, that also, showed me how a small group of committed people can quickly become a large group of mobilized people. And that can make a huge difference. So, I think it's one of the themes that I hear a lot that, a small group of people can end up making a massive difference. Um, you know, Recently, for the last 5 years or so, I've been doing historical research on the history of fossil fuel companies, especially what they knew about climate change and when, and what they told the public about it. And, you know, that information, and, in case you haven't heard, and you may have, I think the basic conclusion of that is that, these companies had a very sophisticated understanding of climate change and the fact that their products would cause it decades ago, by the early 80s or so, and then, you know, engaged in deceptive campaigns towards the public, either outright denial or often, half truths or misleading statements, or just downplaying the threat and downplaying the urgency. And so all of that has become very central to climate lawsuits in the US, around the world. We heard Senator Whitehouse mention the comparison to tobacco lawsuits, and that's a very good comparison. And in other countries, there are also legal efforts occurring that are based on different models. So I think that this is an emerging area. This climate litigation effort is emerging, and I think it's going to end up being, a significant part of the solution to this problem. And I hope it will synergize with all the other efforts that people are making, from grassroots activism to investment behavior changes and things like that.
So interesting. And great to hear. I do have a question for both of you. I'm imagining that folks watching our conference today might be wondering how they might be thinking about their own projects and their own needs in their communities and want to get involved and want to become a climate superhero, as we say, in their own right. Do either of you have any advice for either how folks at our conference can get involved in their own projects and take that next step, or in either of your projects?
And I can start. So one of my favorite sayings literally is, or statements that I often make is, we don't inherit the earth from our ancestors, but we borrow it from our children. So look in your neighborhood, look in your community, identify one issue that you don't want your children to have to struggle with, and make the determination of where you want to stand when your children are older. Where is it that you want to be? Where do you want to stand on that issue when the story is told? Did I stand on the sidelines and watch it happen? Or did I make the intentional effort to see change? Once you identify that issue, begin to rally around others that are like-minded so that you guys can push forward. It is literally just one step of courage. And so if you want to be involved with Mothers Out Front, you can go to mothersoutfront.org. We have local community teams that are working in various states where we work on local issues, and we also work on statewide issues, and we also have national campaigns. So if you need some assistance because you cannot find anyone in your area, you're more than welcome to join us. We would love for you to be a part to make that change that your children and your grandchildren deserve to see. So again, that is mothersoutfront.org.
Yeah, and one of the things I think that is true about climate change, like so many, or climate change work, like so many things in life, is that it's largely about people. Finding a group of people who you identify with, who you feel at home with, who energize you. I think that's so important, for staying engaged in the long term, for being energized by the work, and for ultimately making an impact. And so, I like to, tell people that it's not, there's no one size fits all way to engage with the climate problem. We're all different. We have different interests. We're in different, situations in our lives. And there are lots of different ways to engage. And, it's okay to try something and to see how it goes, and, either keep going with it or change your mind and try something else. but finding something that you really enjoy, not just that you like feel obligated to do or something like that, but that you really enjoy, you really love. I think that's so important. With regard to climate litigation, I think that one tangible thing that everyone can do is to, send a message to your political representatives, whether, that's city council people or Congress people at the state or national level, or even your state attorney general, and let them know that you support efforts to hold fossil fuel companies accountable for climate damages and so on. That is important, because when representatives know that there's public support for these efforts, just like for the tobacco accountability efforts decades ago, then it's much easier to pursue them. They're more likely to pursue them. So that's a way to engage. But of course, I try not to tell people how to do it, but that's just an option. But of course, it's about finding how you can express yourself and engage with the issue in a way that you feel personally connected with. I think it's so important.
That is such good advice. And I do think you're right. Our elected officials need to be hearing from us. And it's also a matter of prioritization. They get so many different letters, emails every day about a whole host of issues. It might, it's certainly not that they don't care, but there's people who have limited time and energy and resources. So we need to be showing that their constituents want them to prioritize this, because we just don't have any more time to wait to protect our planet, protect people on our planet, and fight climate change. I think I definitely love the advice that both of you gave. I think it's true that it takes just starting to reach out to your neighbors. There's small actions that you can take that build up. LaTisha, I think you're so right that there's also just a lot of groups out there that would love volunteers. So if you are working on your own project, that's amazing. But if you're not sure where to start, you could always Google climate groups that need volunteers, and they'd be super happy to have you. I think my advice would be just that you can build things up that start small and make a big impact. On our project, working to get college campuses to go 100% renewable electricity, that doesn't sound like the ultimate solution to the problem, or maybe even the biggest place where you could, the biggest institutions that you could get to electrify. But one is they're bigger than you know. There's so many people who work at these college campuses. There's so many research projects going on, starting at your city government level or your workplace or your child's school can actually make a big impact on reducing emissions, much bigger than you would imagine. And then the second reason to do it is that there's this multiplier effect. The more schools, the more corporations that switch over and make commitments to fighting climate change, the more it becomes the norm, the more other companies have to do the same in order to keep up, to be competitive in the market, to be in competition with their peers that have better commitments than them. So the more small groups that we can get to take action, the easier it is to get some of these bigger commitments, and they all add up. So one thing I wanted to do is invite everyone here who's watching our conference today to submit questions. We're really excited. We wanted to save some time to actually answer audience questions. So you can do that through the conference portal and submit questions, and then we'll receive them. And while folks are writing any questions, I wanted to ask one more of my own, of my fellow panelists here. We've talked a lot about how well our projects went, but I'm sure that is not the whole story. There's always challenges. Things move slower than we want. There's hurdles, there's barriers that we have to overcome. And that's just the reality of working on these tough issues. was there ever a time where you had to overcome a hurdle or a challenge in your project? And then do you have advice for activists out there who might be stuck and kind of need to push through to the next level?
So with working with the project that I was referencing earlier, with the specific neighborhood, we were able, the residents and steering committee was able to develop a Southwest specific plan where it identified areas of improvement and things that we wanted to see. So it was literally the community coming together to say, this is what we want our neighborhood to look like. And it was adopted by our city council. Well, here it is, and this is actually more so recent. 3 years later, they have literally tried to chip away at our plan. We said that we didn't want any more industrial plants in our neighborhood. And now, because Amazon wanted to, put a plant in the neighborhood, they were getting ready to, try to build, but of course it had to go to city council. We were able to organize community residents around that issue, leaders and other groups around that issue, because we said we didn't want any more industrial plants in the neighborhood. So in the moment, we felt defeated because it felt like all of the work that we had done in the last 3 years was for naught. And sometimes you just have to take a step back and say, hey, this is just a small loss, not anything major. But if I give up now, if I quit now, everything that I've been working for will be for nothing. So when you have those minor moments, and even sometimes major moments of setbacks, you have to make sure that you persevere. Even if you just have to take a small step back, do not quit, because if you quit, they will eventually win. So whatever you have to do, continue to fight for what it is that not only you, but your children deserve.
Absolutely.
Excellent advice. I think, never mind, go ahead.
Sorry. Sorry about that. I was just going to say that, activism, it can be very challenging often because, you are coming up against the established power structures of society, almost by definition. That's what activism involves. And so, finding ways to handle that and to, turn that into a positive thing in your life, I think is very important. Back when I worked on fossil fuel divestment, it was very challenging. I started working on that around 2012, and it was very new. I remember I was a grad student at Harvard at the time, and we would even have alumni walk by and tell us, you should go back to the Stone Age and stuff like that. I mean, we were not sort of we weren't seen as reasonable people, even though of course it's completely absurd in retrospect. But simply by proposing something new and pushing to change the established way of doing things, it is difficult, of course. And so, that is something that's why it's so important to have a group of people who are your community, right? To give you that support. And it's also okay to take a step back. It's okay to, recharge, and come back at it charged up and ready to go. And, I think that's so important. So I guess that's my advice. Keep going, find things that work for you, and keep pushing, because that's how change happens. The only way that things change in a directed way is by people pushing for it. And so it might feel like you didn't achieve quite as quickly what you wanted to do, but it still happens. It still happens. And that's also what history shows us, is that that's how change in society happens.
We actually have some questions from the audience, so I'll read some of those. The first one is for you, Ben, though the rest of us can join in. One of the folks in our audience said that you mentioned the history of disinformation and duplicity that has helped block needed climate action. So do you or others of us here on the panel have any thoughts about how the rest of us out there can help overcome this legacy, and what are the odds that we can hold these bad actors accountable?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think one of the most effective ways to overcome or counteract these campaigns of duplicity is to be aware of them. I mean, once you're aware that this is occurring, then it's much more difficult for those campaigns to have, that negative effect. So that's why public communication is so important. I think it's not just about the lawsuits, it's not just about the legal action, but along with that, communicating to the public about what has actually occurred, how much time has been squandered because of these campaigns, and what do we do now? I think it's so very important. And that's something that, it doesn't just require scholarly research, but also effective public communication. So there's a lot of room for all sorts of people to get involved with that effort. As for the likelihood of holding those actors accountable, personally, in sort of my personal view, I think it's only a matter of time. We already have a huge amount of evidence attesting to the fact that these companies knew about this problem in great detail. And I'm not just saying, they said, oh, climate change might happen at some point. There are, hundreds and hundreds of pages of documents that have been found so far saying things like, by the middle of the 21st century, there will be globally catastrophic effects if we continue to use fossil fuels. Those are the internal documents of the fossil fuel companies themselves. So when they turned around and actively impeded action that governments and other groups were trying to take to deal with the problem, that, morally is very bad, and legally also might turn out to be ruled to be not legal as well. So that's very important. And look, the impacts of those actions will be with us for decades. I mean, for the rest of all of our lives right here and beyond us. And that's why I think that it's only a matter of time before these groups are held accountable in some form. Will full justice be done at that point? Of course not. We can't get back what we've lost. We can't get back the time that we've lost, and we can't get back the people that we've lost and the lives that have been negatively affected by that. Those cannot be brought back, but we can do something about it. We can bring the truth to light, and we can try to hold groups accountable and so on. So, that's my view. That's one of the reasons I think it's a very important part of the overall climate effort, because I think it's only a matter of time before we see success.
Great. LaTisha, we have a question for you. Someone in our audience has asked how you've worked with the healthcare community, if at all, if you've received support from them in providing data on asthma to aid in your advocacy effort. They're wondering if you're working with any local or state public health officials.
So a lot of the research and information we got came directly from our county public of health, as well as one of the local clinics that is here based in Fresno. I'm actually in Fresno. So just them providing the data that we needed was all we needed to go ahead and fight for the various projects that we were working on. Another thing that we did is we adopted a school because the principal said, my students are missing a lot of days of school, and the majority of it is because of asthma. So we partnered with that school to do education on asthma, why asthma rates are so high in our neighborhood and in our community, and what they as children can do to combat that, as well as things that their family can do to combat that as well. So utilizing that data to not just have it, but to actually do something with it.
Great. And a follow-up question, people are interested in your group, Mothers Out Front, is hoping you could tell us a little bit more about how somebody could get involved. And then they're also wondering if you've ever worked with science moms, if you've heard of them before.
I'll start backwards. I've never personally worked with science moms, but like I said, we are a national organization. We have staff and community members and volunteers throughout the nation. So I'm sure one of our staff members or volunteers possibly could have. If we haven't, we would love to. We do need the science to support our projects. We do need the science to support our campaigns. We do need the science to help move what it is that we're desiring to do. But if you would like to be a part of Mothers Out Front, again, like I said, we have various teams throughout the nation in various states. You can join a local team by going to www.mothersoutfront.org. And if we do not have a local team in your area, that is okay, because you can be the conduit for change in your region through Mothers Out Front. We provide trainings, whether it's writing a letter to the editor or how to lobby your elected official, whether it's on a local level, a statewide level, or national level. We also offer trainings on how to develop a campaign, how to identify an issue in your area, and how to make those action steps to see progress, to see change. So again, that is www.mothersoutfront.org.
Great. And then this might be the last question that we have time for before we wrap up, but somebody asked what we read or listen to stay up to date on climate information. Do you, either of you, have any hot tips of good sources?
I can't specifically give off the top of my head the exact website. But there is, what I did was on Google News, they send alerts. And so I set it to certain alerts that I wanted to see certain news articles with, but then also I am involved in various groups that send out their publications as well. So my email inbox is inundated with information. Also, I actually watch EcoAmerica very frequently. They do have a podcast. So that is one thing that I do watch frequently. But just being a part of various groups allows access to information.
Yeah, there are, so many climate related, podcasts and books and things like that. Sometimes I kind of avoid them because it's just so much climate stuff. I have to, diversify my my life a little bit. But I think one of the most fascinating podcasts I've heard recently is the Drilled podcast by Amy Westervelt, if you haven't heard it. And that's Amy Westervelt is an amazing investigative journalist, and she has done a lot of research and investigation on what Exxon knew about climate change and when. She even went and interviewed former scientists that worked at Exxon in the 80s on climate change, things like that. And I think every season of her podcast focuses on a different issue. So I think that's there are so many, and I don't want to be remiss by leaving out so many good things, but lately that's something I've been listening to, and I think it's just fantastic.
I'm a big fan of some of the Politico newsletters that I get in my inbox. I think those are really helpful to stay up to date. I'm subscribed to the one for my state, for California, so all of the California political updates that are happening, as well as they have a climate newsletter as well. So all of the breaking news on climate and climate politics across the country and internationally. That one is more of the, that I would say is less of the long-term research trends and more of the breaking political updates, but I recommend that one as well. All right, well, we're wrapping up our panel now, and just wanted to say thank you so much. We're excited to be a part of the rest of the conference. And it was great to hear from both of you about the amazing work you're doing to fight for our climate. It's really needed.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
us
Yeah,
today.
yeah. I think we're all thankful to be here, and there's so many others who have helped us along the way. So.
Hello, I'm Lynn Goldman, Dean of the Milken Institute School of Public Health at the George Washington University and proud sponsor of the 11th Annual American Climate Leadership Summit. My colleagues and I are honored to join the thousands of leaders here who share our passion to reduce long-term climate change, promote resilient communities, and protect all people from the health impacts of environmental change. The climate crisis is the single greatest global and domestic public health challenge of our time. Negative health impacts created by climate change include increased respiratory and cardiovascular disease, certain forms of cancer, premature deaths related to extreme weather events, food insecurity and hunger, waterborne illnesses, and threats to mental health. GW's Susan Annenberg and Sabrina McCormick launched the Climate and Health Institute last fall. The Institute brings together world-class researchers across a number of disciplines to better inform policies and practices and to train the next generation of leaders poised to take action on this critical public health problem. By bringing a health and equity lens to the climate change conversation, GW's Climate and Health Institute will hopefully bring to bear an important set of stakeholders to the climate fight. The Milken Institute School of Public Health at GW is proud to collaborate with partners like ACLS and stakeholders in government, NGOs, and business to address the complex cross-cutting challenge that climate change represents. We're grateful to all of you for your leadership and for participating in the summit. Congratulations to the Leadership Award winners for their achievements and commitment to action.
My name is Sydney Otis, and I'm the Network Engagement Manager with EcoAmerica. I'm so proud to work with our climate ambassadors across the Blessed Tomorrow, Climate for Health, and Path to Positive Communities programs. EcoAmerica's Climate Ambassador program provides training that equips leaders across the health, faith, and community sectors to be effective climate advocates. At the end of the training, ambassadors sign an advocacy commitment and join the ambassador program, where EcoAmerica continues to develop their capacity as climate advocates through customizable resources, a private online community of other ambassadors, and ongoing staff support. There's a training for the health, faith, and communities programs of EcoAmerica, and you can take one online right now by visiting the program website. Climate ambassadors are students, pediatricians, pastors, nurses, parents. They're people like us spanning the health, faith, and community sector who want to make a difference on climate. Let's hear from a few of our ambassadors on why they do it.
My name is Sheil Patel. I am a climate ambassador for Path to Positive Communities from Wilmington, North Carolina.
My name is Dr. V. Thuy Nguyen. I'm a pediatrician in San Diego, California, and I am part of Climate for Health.
My name is Shruti Agarwal, and I'm a sophomore at Archie High School. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I'm a part of the Path to Positive Ambassador community.
Hi, my name is Milagros Elia, and I am an oncology nurse. I live in Putnam County, New York, and I'm a Climate for Health ambassador.
Being a climate ambassador means developing close networks with other fellow ambassadors and constantly being motivated to take action in my community.
What being a climate ambassador means to me is that it means I'm part of a larger community that puts the health of children and the planet first. I truly believe the hashtag, we borrow the earth from our children.
I became a climate ambassador because I wanted to show that climate change is relevant in today's world and how we can take personal steps to make sure that the effects of climate change are not as strong in the future. I also love learning from others and hearing their perspectives so that together we can work together to solve this issue.
I became a climate ambassador to gain the knowledge to advocate for issues around environmental justice and to inspire my colleagues and policymakers in making a change on climate solutions that help protect the health of our communities we live and serve.
You can join Sheil, V, Shruti, and the hundreds of other ambassadors right now by taking the training online at your own pace. The Climate Ambassador training is one step we can all take to become more effective as climate advocates in our homes, workplaces, congregations, and communities. Feel more empowered, supported, and confident in your climate advocacy. Get started now by visiting any of our program websites to learn more and sign up for the training.